Hey, I'm Kelly Riggs. Welcome to Counter Mentors, the podcast. Hey, while I'm waiting on my co-host, my son, Robby Riggs, the millennial who's never on time for anything, let me introduce the upcoming guest. We're so excited to have Bill Blankenship join us. Former D1 football coach at the University of Tulsa, has won in high school in 3 different high schools. He's been state champions. We're going to learn a lot about leadership and adapting to the new millennial workforce. Hey, find us, countermentors.com. Follow me at Kelly Riggs and follow Robby when he finally gets here at Robby Riggs. We'll see you on the other side.
This is Counter Mentors with Kelly and Robby Riggs. Finally, a place where you can get both perspectives on challenges in the workplace from a boomer and a millennial. The Counter Mentor is the new leader. Join us as we show you how to blend the very best of both generations, young and old. This is Counter Mentors. And here are your hosts, Kelly and Robby Riggs.
Hey, welcome back into the Counter Mentors podcast. Like we said on the first part, Pops, we are thrilled to have really a coaching legend. Coach Bill Blankenship is with us. His accolades are too long to read. We'll just tell you this. He has won a lot of football games and influenced a lot of young minds. And boomers, all of you that are saying you can't connect with young people, you struggle with young people, stop it. No excuses. Coach Blankenship has done it. We're super excited. Coach, welcome to the show.
Hey, man. Great to be with both of you. Kelly and I go way back, but obviously not quite as far with you.
Well, I'm glad you went ahead and called you guys old. That kind of beat me to it. I appreciate that.
Hey, I think it doesn't do any justice to the show if we don't introduce Bill a little bit, Rob. Of course, he is a legend for us because he grew up in Oklahoma, played at the University of Tulsa, coached at Union High School, 6A, top of the heap there in high school, and won 3 titles in his time there. Then he went to the University of Tulsa.
Well, hold on, Pops. Much to my chagrin, because I went to high school at his crosstown rival. So it was much to my chagrin.
Yeah,
he won one of those championships. Yeah.
Well, back in the day, I was interviewing him all the time because I was a co-owner in a sports media production company. So I got to know him pretty well and got to see a lot of the flavor of his culture and how he did things. From there, he went on to the University of Tulsa. And he was there 4 years and actually won a Liberty Bowl there, 11-3, Conference USA Coach of the Year. Then he goes back into high school in Fayetteville 7A, top of the heap over there, wins a championship. Then,
he just wins.
Yeah, he just wins. Then he comes back to Owasso High School, 6A again, which was kind of a nominal rival, Bill, for so many years to Union and Broken Arrow and Jinx, which is another one of those legendary schools here in Tulsa. And you just happened to win the 6A title again last year. I don't know. All he does is win. I mean, it's absolutely
no matter what.
No matter what.
So make a song out of that or something, you know.
Well,
That's
yeah.
right. Let's talk to our boy DJ Khaled.
That's right. Well, what I found out, Bill, in this day and age, to make a hit song is really all you need is like 3 words and a beat. And
Easy.
You're good to go.
Come on.
I mean, anybody can do it. I mean, it's nothing to it.
Or remix one from our era, and then you've got to do it.
That's right.
Find a hook from your era.
Exactly right.
All right,
listen,
so go ahead, Bob.
Well, listen, here's the thing. I'm dying to have Bill on the show, because I know him a little bit, and he's legendary around here. But really, Rob, what we're interested in as counter mentor leadership guys is how does he connect with those young people? And Bill, I know you've got to be doing something consistent in the locker room and with these kids, and we're going to go back and talk about how it's changed over the years. But how do you set up a culture inside of a high school, no less, really young kids, 15 to 18, how do you set up a culture of winning and do it over and over and over again?
Part of it, Kelly, is, I'd like to say that there was a recipe and was a way that anybody could do it. I think you just call on the experiences of your life and you figure out what works and what doesn't work. And I've been in this business long enough to have a lot of ridden the roller coaster, man. I mean, highs and lows. Most people just talk about the highs, but
right.
you learn as much from the struggles as you do, from the successes. It's as simple sometimes as learn what doesn't work and learn what works. and try to replicate what works and continue to do that. And the stuff that didn't work, try to forget about it.
Yeah,
Wow.
Coach, you bring up such a great insight, of course, right off the bat, as we know you would, and that's around failure. And we see young people entering the workplace, and you get them, 4 to 6 years before that, depending on when they enter the workplace. But we see that failure can often be debilitating for the younger generation, and that they've quite literally never failed before. So talk to me about, when you have a kid on 3rd and 8 and your quarterback rolls out and he misses a wide open receiver and you have to punt and you lose the game. How do you pull him aside and help him develop and learn from that failure without him feeling like I quit? I can't do it. I've never failed before. I quit. How do you do that?
Well, I think if we wait for the first failing to be on 3rd and 8, then we're in trouble, because we won't come back from that. We have to learn how to deal with failing. It starts, Robbie, with your definition of failure. Too often we deal with folks that believe that failing is the same as failure, and that's not the case. We all know that you learn and grow by failing. I mean,
right.
The fact that we all walked into our office today is testimony to the fact that we learned how to walk, and we didn't learn how to walk without falling down a whole bunch.
Yeah.
Okay? The difference between little kids learning to walk and some of us as adults and young adults is sometimes we don't want to get off the ground. Because it's too embarrassing to say that we didn't do it as great as some others did. The thing I love about sport, and especially the sport that I've been blessed to be a part of, is that I've been in the arena and failed at a high level with teams, with my sons, with people I love. And man, you're out there laying your heart and soul and everything.
Mm-hmm.
This is all for a championship. And you fail in front of everybody. I mean, your heart is stomped on in front of everybody.
Yeah.
And somehow you want to do it again.
Man.
Wow, that's crazy stuff.
I think there's something about a competitor's heart that draws me to them, because a competitor comes back from failing and they want a chance to do it again. And I think a lot of us as parents and now grandparents, we do our kids a disservice when we don't let them endure some failing and learn from it. And so going back to your question about maybe some strategy, I will tell you that in the off season now and 1 year ago when I came to Owasso, we're trying to compete nearly every day in events where there is a winner and a loser.
Intentionally,
because you have to learn how to win, but you also have to learn that it's not just participation. There is a loss that takes place. And so we keep points in off season, and it's not to grind anybody, but it is to develop that look. When something goes wrong, if you're defeated, then you have no chance of developing yourself into a champion. You've got to learn how to, I lost that one. I got to go. I got to get up. I got to, whatever it is. I tell people all the time, and I wasn't a baseball guy, but I will tell you, if you're a great pitcher, you don't dwell on what you did bad. I will tell you this, Tom Brady's thrown more interceptions than most all of the quarterbacks in the world.
Yeah.
He don't think about that, nor does anybody else, because he's thinking about all the ways that I'm going to win this game. And I'm telling you, I was a big Eagle fan, but I will say this: when he got the ball back with less than 2 minutes to go, and I'm like, here it goes again. Because
here it goes again. No,
that dude has experienced enough failing in his life that I knew he knew how to overcome it.
Absolutely right.
We talk about that, and Pops, before we throw it over to you, Coach, we talk a lot about how the older generation, what we're seeing and the shortcomings and some of the real challenges entering the workplace are a result of exactly what you just said, the younger generation not learning to fail. And Pops, you and I have talked about that a lot on this show.
Yeah, there's no doubt. And Bill, the question I have for you relates to the way people react to failure very specifically. There's always a tendency to suggest that it's not my fault. It's the circumstances around me, whether you're playing sports or you're in life or you're, at work or whatever. There's this whole idea of what's called fundamental attribution error. I attribute my failure to something else, whereas when I see you fail, it's your fault, right? So I know you've got to deal with that with kids in particular. When you have a player that tends to blame other things around you, how do you deal with that specifically?
Well, first of all, I think I have to accept the fact that it is human nature. I mean, this is not a character flaw in a youngster to think that he isn't the problem. It is the way he's been raised. It's the way we've all been raised. It's just kind of our nature to want to believe that we're pretty good and somebody else is messing us still up.
Right.
Yeah.
When I got fired by my alma mater at the University of Tulsa, I had great relationships with the young men that I got to coach. And it initially kind of hurt me when they so embraced their new coach. And then as I stepped away and you kind of get a grip, and I wasn't mad at Coach Monty. I mean, I'm happy for him because he didn't have anything to do with my firing. But it originally hurt me a little bit because my players were like, and then when I came to Owasso, they did exactly the same thing. These guys embraced me as the new, and it hit me. It was kind of an aha moment that, let me tell you what players do. They're sincere, but they really don't think they're the issue.
Right.
They never think they're the one, and I think that goes to Kelly's point is we just have to accept the fact that that's a beginning point for most of us that, why can't people be normal like me? Why?
That's right.
So I think that if we understand that, then that helps me as I go into accountability issues with our team. And so that's one of the ways that I try to develop that leadership style is that there is accountability for your group or yourself or whatever. And we don't try to make it this isn't a point of contention. Like, I tell our coach this all the time. I'm not trying to run a kid off because he was late. He just is going to push the plate because that's what we do. And so I don't make it a character issue. I'm not going to, dress him down just because he did this, but I am going to hold him accountable because he's the one that was late. And he'll say, Mom didn't get me here. And I'm saying, well, unless you want Mom to come out here and run for you, then I'm holding you accountable.
Coach, that's a perfect segue to what we want to talk about. We're talking to Coach Blankenship here. And for those of you who don't know, Oklahoma high school football is like the things of lore in Texas. I mean, it's a big, big deal. And growing up in Oklahoma, we don't have a professional team. We have our Oklahoma Sooners, and we have high school on Friday nights. So really excited to have Coach Blankenship, who is coach of the reigning 6A state champion.
I noticed how you left the University of Tulsa and Oklahoma State out of that dialogue.
Oh, I'm sorry. Was that my alma mater bias coming out? Sorry about that. My bad. Big shout out to Baker Mayfield. Anyway, Coach Blankenship, one of the things I want to talk about is we are big believers, and we write about this a lot in our book. We've talked about a lot on the show about setting very clear expectations. And you started to evolve into this place that I really want to dig on because I think it's so critically important. And that's how we set expectations enables us to hold people accountable. We use the example of Coach Belichick all the time about do your job, and that has a very specific meaning by position group.
Right.
And the Pops and I are just huge sports geeks, so we love this stuff. So talk to me about how you set expectations at the top level for the kind of people, the kind of players we're going to be here at Owasso, but also how you push that down to your assistants, to the linebackers coach, how he translates that to be relevant for the linebackers. So talk to us about expectations, how you set them top line and how you push them down.
Well, there's a lot there, and so don't let me get too far chasing one or the other because those are really good points. I want to talk about all of that. Let's start with how you begin. I really believe as I came to Owasso, I'll give you an example, is I started having Wednesday morning before school meetings for what I called leadership. And I said, if you are a leader, if you think you're a leader, if you want to be a leader, show up, 7 o'clock, we're going to have these. And so that whole process was about me laying out kind of what I thought we ought to be about. I'm kind of giving them my take on philosophy of coaching and how to go about things and what a lot of the lingo they're going to hear from me.
Mm-hmm.
And then we got to a point where we basically just did a brainstorming over about a 3-week period of who do we want to be and how do we want to measure that and what's that look like. And so what were the characteristics that they came up with? Well, accountability, effort. And so they came up with a list of 3 or 4 or 5, and those became our prime movers in terms of what we were going to hold each other accountable to. And then it becomes easier for me to say, wait, you said
that's right.
going to do, this is what you wanted us to do. This wasn't my idea. This is what you said.
Right.
So part of coaching for me is helping you to do what you say you want to do, even when you don't feel like doing it. And so that's part of trying to hold you to a standard. And then our assistant coaches, let me get to that. I think the first thing is you got to surround yourself with people that agree to the vision, that agree to the kind of the process. They don't all have to be at the same place, but they can't be one guy not thinking this is important. And so to give you some ideas, most everybody that's on this staff, if they weren't already on Owasso, and I am glad with the guys that we kept that were here, were guys either that I had coached against or I had coached. And I knew them from a competitive standpoint, and I knew them from a personal standpoint, because it was all about getting the chemistry right in our staff room. I've never had a great team without a great staff. And the staff has to be a mirror or an example of what we're trying to get from our team. And so the unity, the pushing each other, the holding of accountability, all those kind of things are huge for a staff to be able to move that, continue it into the team, and to build that. And so now let me finish with this third thought, kind of tying it all together. There's a group called 3-dimensional coaching. And they've kind of seized on this now, but it's been something that we've been doing for a long time. I just didn't know how to put it into words. All across America, coaches, I think the stats are like 90-something% of coaches have a physical plan for how to train their players. Physically. There's a way less, somewhere in the 50-60 range, of coaches at a high level that have a plan to develop their players mentally, to teach them the game, how to challenge themselves, how to work through issues, how to, the mind of the game. And there's a very small percentage that coach the third dimension. Now, a lot of us believe in it, and, we could define it as the heart or the character or what makes you who you are, that inner part of you.
Right.
And I think it's vital that we have just as important of playbook and game plan for developing that third dimension as we do either the mental or the physical. And so to have coaches that buy into that, and we have a weekly process, and I'm not saying we're not trying to get better at it, but we have a curriculum. It's not really, but we have a plan and strategies of how to develop these character traits in the hearts of our players, and to give them opportunity to do it themselves and to hold each other accountable for it. So starts with what they say they want to be, and then I've got to find a mechanism, a curriculum, so to speak, to get what they say they want to be and to continue to build it in them.
Yeah, that's exciting stuff. And I think that's probably very much true in the workplace too, son. When you look at the way we train people in the workplace, many times
Absolutely.
We have the physical side of it. We don't do really well in the skills-based training. We don't do anything with mindset training or character-based things. And I think we see the same thing in the workplace. And I think that's why, Bill, so many workplaces seem a little bit empty, because it's all the focus on whatever the results are, not really have anything to do with the person themselves. What do you do when someone, or maybe you've never seen it, but I know a little bit about kids. Sometimes they look at these kinds of things and they tend to think, this is a little too fluffy for me, or maybe their heart is guarded, or they're not vulnerable like they need to be. Do you ever run across players or kids that don't buy into that? And if so, how do you deal with that?
Well, I just pick it a little bit, and then pick it a little bit more, and just pick it. And what I'm trying to say is this: look, they're not all going to get it.
Yeah.
But what if they get just a little bit?
Right.
What if they get just an introduction, and someone says, that this week the character trait is perseverance. Okay, and we've been dealing with perseverance, and they think this is the biggest bunch of hooey I don't know why Coach has us sitting out here in groups, and why we're and people are asking questions, and some guys are into it and some aren't. But I'll tell you this, that dude's going to have to learn how to persevere. And maybe when he's a dad, or maybe when he has a job with a boss that maybe it'll come back to him, just a snippet of some of the things that he heard, and that we tried to hold him accountable to what they said they wanted to be held accountable for. It might help him persevere.
Absolutely. Hey, I'm curious, as when you came to Owasso, clearly you've got a legacy of winning. Did you come to Owasso first year? I mean, their history. They've had some success in football. They've never competed really, just briefly, maybe at the level that the Union schools did when you were there, and Jinx with Alan Trimble and all that. But did you have an expectation, and did you communicate an expectation from day one? We're going to go win this title.
No, I don't think we talked a lot about winning the title. We talked about being able to compete with the highest at the highest level. Before you can ever win it, you got to get into it. I would tell you, probably about week 8 or 9 in the season, I talked to our team that we had just gotten back from a road trip to Norman North, and I won't bore you with all the details, but we had played well, and we began to see some things that really excited me. And so I told our team after that game that for the first time, I can tell you we have what it takes. Now, that doesn't mean you win it. That doesn't mean, but for the first time, I really believe we have the characteristics of a championship ball club if we'll continue to develop it from here through the playoffs. Prior to that time, I thought we had a chance to be pretty good, but man, it's just never been done. The hardest thing to do is something that you've never done.
Right.
Yeah. It's because you can say it all you want, but we haven't ever done this. I tell people all the time, my first 6 months here, I could have made probably a pretty good chunk of change and saved myself a whole lot of problem if we'd have just printed T-shirts that said we'd never done this. Trying to do, what do you think? But everyone's looking at you like, well, we've never done that. Well, okay. Well, I'm not saying that's the answer, but how about let's do something we haven't done?
Yeah. Let's think differently. The definition of insanity, of course, being doing the same thing over and over, getting the same results. Coach, one thing that I've always respected and appreciated about you and what you've done is, and we love talking about this with coaches, is your tree. So you have coached a lot of great players that have gone to do great things. You've had great coaches on your staff that have gone on to do great teams. Players have become coaches. You have been truly a developer of leaders. And when we talk about counter-mentor leadership, we've seen you continue to learn and grow from your coaches, and we've seen you develop them. So give me, I know there's a lot. I know we wrote a book on it, right? We know there's a lot. But what's in your mind, the number one most important thing about developing one of your leaders to see them go off and do great things, maybe even things you didn't think possible?
Right. I don't know how that affects or how I affect that, other than, you just give them what you can at the time. And I believe strongly that leaders are both born and developed. And I think that we have leadership gifts in us that are just naturally we've been blessed with. But we also have to train that and to develop that. And I think that's so cool about what you guys do, because you're doing that. But I think there are on the contrary, is I don't know if this is factual, but I think if you don't have a lick of leadership in your DNA, you can get all the books and training and all the stuff you want. You may struggle to be a big time leader, but you can develop whatever you have. And I just have constantly tried to place my guys when I see that bent in them, I just try to give them more and try to keep them out in front. And I think it's a skill that you practice, leadership. And as you practice it, you tend to decline.
And it's an amazing thing, Pops. You and I talk about this all the time, and we hear this is the number one excuse we hear in the workplace, Coach, is I don't have time. And you said something very, very compelling and, I mean, light bulb moment. So if you're listening to this in your car, or you're on the train, or you're on a run, hear what Coach is saying. He intentionally spent time with that person. And Pops, that's tough to do. I mean, you and I see this all the time.
Well, it's the number one problem inside the workplace. People don't have time to be a leader. You know, Bill, they've got to fight fires and deal with customers and deal with all the issues of owning or running a department, a business, whatever the case may be. And so they never really do the kinds of things you're talking about, where they create these extra meetings to deal with culture and character and the various things that are really critically important. And it really runs me into a question that I've been dying to ask you, because most people would be saying, listen, you know, Bill's a good guy. He's clearly connects with his players. He develops his coaches and all that. But listen, you don't win football games unless you're technically good. You got to be an X's and O's guy. And I know that's true. I mean, there's a sense in which, you know, your football acumen lends itself to success. But I want to ask you a very pointed question. If I had to ask you to force rank it, how much of your success as a football coach is based on the leadership and culture and the organizational skills, and how much of it is based on you just being a really good X's and O's guy?
I think it's a little bit like oxygen. You got to have it when you got to have it. And what I mean by that is the X's and O's if you don't have it, you can only get to a certain level with motivation and, you know, guys playing hard and all that kind of stuff. I do think coaching matters, and I do think our abilities matter. But by the same token, you can't rely on X's and O's. I mean, you see it all the time. The smartest coaches don't win. That's not the way it works.
Right.
When I say the smartest coach, the guys that know the most football.
Yeah.
It's understanding how to teach. And, you know, there's a cliche in coaching, and I think it's true in business. It's not what I know that matters. It's what I can teach that matters.
Yes.
You know, it's how much that my players can learn from me. And so I am constantly trying to develop. You know, I was just talking to a coach of 40 years yesterday, and we were talking about going to coaching meetings and coaching clinics, because I'm going to do some this weekend. And I always said, you know, if I can come back with one or two little snippets of how to teach it better, you know, maybe it's a phrase or a buzzword, or maybe it's a technique. I'm not looking to show up in August with a whole new offense and defense. But, man, if I can find one or two little things to help me, and I think too often we get to a point, you know, maybe where I'm in my career, and we think, man, you know, I'm pretty dang good. So, you know, I'm just telling you, I'm constantly learning. And I think that's one of the things that helps me is I'm not through, you know, trying to play football from the 70s, 80s, and 90s. I'm trying to get this 61-year-old to play in this, you know, decade. You know, I'm trying to understand the game and play at a high level. And that's the other reason I have great coaches around me.
Well, yeah. I want to ask a follow-up, son. You know, it's interesting because you guys have a really advanced offense. I mean, you guys throw it around the yard. You look a lot like the college and pro teams. You've got a very sophisticated style and approach and all that. But what if you don't have the assets to run that effectively? I mean, it takes a certain kind of quarterback, Bill, you know, right, to make reads and line people up and do the things you need to do. And you got to have some guys that can go catch it, and you got to have somebody that can be a threat in the middle running the ball. What if you don't have those one or more of those assets? I cannot see you going, well, okay, this year we're just going to be pretty mediocre. We're going to be average. How do you adjust when you don't have the tools or the players?
That's a great question.
Well, you said it. I mean, seriously, great coaches, I believe, are the best adjusters. They're the most flexible. you know, I've had years that I didn't have that quarterback. I've had years I didn't have a great offensive line or a good defense. I mean, you have to find a way to accentuate your strengths and to hide your weaknesses. So, you know, if all of a sudden I don't have, you know, offensive linemen, well, I'm probably not going to line up in 2 tight ends and a fullback and a straight eye and run power.
Right.
You know, I probably need to get out into space somehow and to get the ball out of my hands. You know, if I don't have that quarterback, I'm going to find something that I have. And I think that's the fun. That's probably what's kept me in this game as long as it has, because I love figuring out my team for next year. What is our identity and what are we going to look like?
Yeah, that's amazing, Robbie, because what we see is so many coaches and workplace managers that say, no, this is the way we do it. All right. So This is the way we've always done it. Right. And
that's right. No,
it's going to be really tough.
It's huge. You know, Coach, I said this at the beginning, the Pops and I we're diehard sports fans, all sports, and especially football. You know, Pops played in college, so I grew up around, very, very fond memories at the football field playing football. So it's near and dear to our hearts. And we've been intentional about studying great coaches that have been successful. And we found that there are 3 consistent traits across these great coaches. They are fanatical in their preparation, they set great expectations, and they have an incredible ability to adjust and adapt. And in this conversation, I'm sitting here in my mind going, check, check, check. Like Coach Blankenship is again proving this to us just in this interview that is a true theme across highly effective and coaches that last. You're not, saying, well, this is the way we do things. We run power I here, regardless of how, we're all undersized in the middle. So it's so cool to hear that and to hear you get into this. My final question, the last thing that I wanted to ask is, as you prepare for a new season, you kind of mentioned this ahead of time, as you prepare for a new season, talk to me about how you take time to reflect on the year that was, do that lessons learned both for you as a leader heads down and with your staff, and then how you take the time to prepare and think about your next year. Kind of walk me through that, because it seems like something that's uber critical, and I want to hear it from a high performing coach's perspective.
Well, the week after the season, win, lose, or draw, unfortunately the last few have been wins, I meet with the seniors and I give them a little 1 or 2 page evaluation form that I ask them to help us keep this program going in the right direction. And you don't have to sign it, but what are the things of this program that you're really proud of? What are things that we need to do better? And then I ask them the same questions, and very generally, what's the best thing your position coach does? What are some things maybe he should do better? The coordinators, the head coach, I ask them, what are the things that I do really well, and what are the things that you think that I could do better? And you get a mixed bag, and you got to, sometimes people ask for evaluation and they don't really want evaluation. They want affirmation.
Right.
That's a fact.
So we got to be careful about that. But when I ask those guys, I got to be willing to take this. Now, I also got to understand context. If this guy was thought he should have been playing and he didn't, and he may not have it, but that's still valid. Okay. That's still valid information. So anyway, I get all that. I do the similar eval with our coaches. And I think it's important for us to constantly identify, what are we proud of? What do we think are some of our signatures that we're proud of? And what do we agree that we got to get better at? And it can be generic, but it gives me some targets for the off season. Then as we move through the off season, I'm constantly trying to just get more information, get new ideas. I'm trying to get to know our players moving into next year. We are actively in February involved in trying to develop new leaders for this team. And so we have some, during our off season, we divide up into 8 groups, and we have 8 team leaders. And in those 8 team leaders, we have junior team leaders. And so there's 16 guys getting a chance to hone some skills. They didn't get elected. They didn't get chosen. The coaches sat around and go, who do we need to develop? And it wasn't like, who's the captain? That's not what this is.
Yeah.
This is, who are the guys that need to grow for us to have this kind of – and so we come up with these, 16 names, and we just put them in charge of small groups, and they're held accountable, and they get to make some decisions and do those kind of things. So we're trying to develop that. And then as we move towards the summer, I do think this is absolutely vital. I have to get away, and I have to have a, for lack of a better term, a Sabbath time, a shutdown time, where for me, it's sitting on that beach, getting the lawn chair halfway into the water, putting some headsets on, reading some good books, getting some feedback that I'm too busy most of the time to get. And it's amazing how much of the theme and the mottos and the kind of the speaking points come to me during that summer of what we're going to do in this next season.
Gosh, that's great stuff. By the way, speaking of good books, we do happen to know one you might check.
We got one for you, Coach. I'm going to send you one.
Who wrote it?
Oh, well, I wrote it. Some brilliant guy in it.
I got you. Okay.
Hey, music says we got to get out of here, son. It's been a great interview. Real quickly, hot take from you today.
Man, just being with Coach and hearing him talk about the importance of preparation, setting expectations, and the ability to adapt and change, huge takeaway for me.
Absolutely, an affirmation of all the things we've talked about. Leadership is consistent, son, and that's really good stuff. Hey, we're Counter Mentors. You can find us at countermentors.com. Follow Robby at Robby Riggs, and follow me at Kelly Riggs. You'll get better stuff if you follow me. Just remember that.
That's true.
That's going to do it. Episode number 40 in the books, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for tuning into Counter Mentors with Kelly and Robby Riggs. For more information about the show, to listen to past shows, or to learn more about how Kelly and Robby teach companies the counter mentoring process, visit countermentors.com. The Counter Mentors Show is presented by One-on-One Media, Incorporated. All rights reserved. Opinions expressed by guests on the show may not be the opinions of One-on-One Media or the host of the Counter Mentors Show.